Welcome to Business Insight Fredericton. I'm Krista Ross, CEO of the Fredericton Chamber of Commerce, your host. Tonight, our show has been filmed at the Delta Marriott Hotel here in Fredericton at the beautiful new Steamer 36 Barbecue and Social. In today's episode, we're doing something a little different. We've developed a panel. So we have three business owners who have pivoted through COVID. First, we have Jenny Wilson, one of the co-owners of the 11th Mile, Scott Williams, one of the owners of Taylor Printing, and Pat Whalen, the owner of Lumen Ultra. So in March of 2020, COVID-19 hit really close to home. Schools were closed beginning on Monday, March 15th. The government established the first state of emergency order, and on March 19th, many businesses were told they must close their doors to the public. From each of your perspectives, how did that impact your business? Scott, I'm going to start with you.
That first week had a real impact on us. It was north of $1 million that we lost in the next 72 hours, just with various projects that either got canceled or put on hold. And as we'll probably talk about, things changed after that. We're a full-service communications and printing provider, and just prior to Christmas acquired a business in Halifax that effectively doubled our size, and unable to travel there.
So Jenny, I'd like to ask you, first of all, tell us your business name and all that, but then tell us how this impacted your business.
Sure, I'm Jenny Wilson, and together with my husband, Peter Tompkins, we own a restaurant in downtown Fredericton called 11th Mile. So we actually closed just the day before the directive came out that we had to close, because it was becoming pretty obvious that it probably wasn't responsible to continue to run a restaurant with so many uncertainties. So that meant everybody went home, and at that point the future was very unclear. We weren't sure whether we were supposed to lay our employees off or what would happen in terms of their income, which was our first concern. But that cleared up probably within 3 or 4 days. Announcements were made about what we should expect. So we ceased doing business completely.
So Pat Whalen, Chairman and CEO of Lumen Ultra Technologies. We're in the molecular biology diagnostic testing business, which prior to March 20th, nobody knew what the hell that was. And we started going into conservation mode at that point. And then on March 20th, when the Prime Minister issued his call to action for companies across Canada to support with personal protective equipment and ventilators and hand sanitizers. And he didn't mention testing, but we decided to take it upon ourselves. I took it upon myself to reach out to people in the federal government and ask how could we help. And within about 3 weeks, we were providing 500,000 tests per week to all provincial health laboratories across Canada.
One of the things that we noticed as a Chamber of Commerce is how quickly people pivoted and figured out what they were going to do. So I guess that's my next question. What was your first response? What did you decide to do next?
There just was so much uncertainty and not knowing how long was this going to last. And so by Wednesday, we have made the commitment to all of our employees. We have about 75 employees between Fredericton and Halifax, that we would keep them on until the end of April. Not knowing what was going to happen, not knowing that in the next 72 hours we were going to lose $1 million in business. So those were trying days, and it was that weekend, not unlike Pat, like what can we do, and realizing that we had all of the equipment to produce face shields. The next thing was going to be finding the materials to make them, and so by the following Tuesday, so really in a 2-week span, we went from losing a lot of business, not knowing what was going on, all the uncertainty, to actually having to hire people so that we could produce the face shields that we had orders for. And we're still making face shields today, but we're seeing work come back in the traditional space as well.
Jenny, your business was very different. The pivot for you was challenging because you weren't allowed to be open at all. Tell us what you decided to do once things started to be a little more clear.
Well, it was challenging for us because, again, part of the question wasn't can we do business, it was should we do business. So because a restaurant is not essential, we really felt heavily the weight of, okay, how are our actions going to impact this community? Do we feel confident we can undertake business in a safe way. And if you recall, this was back when we were washing groceries before bringing them into the house. So Peter and I knew even if we go in and work alone, you have to go to the store, you have to have deliveries coming in, you have to have things coming and going from the restaurant. So we waited, our first plan was to wait 2 weeks and make sure that we were healthy. At that point, it was obvious it was not time to move ahead. Everyone was still being asked to stay in their homes. We waited about 5 weeks, and then just Peter and I went to work and started doing curbside. And that's a challenge because we wanted, as a restaurant, we don't want to send out food to your home that's not going to be good by the time it gets to your home. So we needed a little time to conceptualize food that you'd be able to finish at home and still have a good experience that would still represent us. And it sounds silly, but even packaging. Sorting the right packaging, worrying about the environment. We want to make sure we're not sending out a bunch of garbage that can't be recycled. So all those things took some time. Once we had those things in place, just Peter and I went to work alone because at that point we still weren't confident that we should draw our employees into that environment with us and be sharing the same space. 2 months to the day that we closed, we reopened.
And how about you, Pat? What was your first move? You talked about being probably more prepared than some businesses were able to be. How did you get going again?
So our initial thought was, well, we have to take care of our customer base, which is 100% essential businesses around the world, everything from drinking water plants to pulp and paper mills that were cranking out record amounts of toilet paper at the time, to the oil and gas sector, which has taken hits, but it's not, by no means is it gone. So our initial plan was we got to make sure we can take care of our existing customers, which means we have to take care of our people. And we have to make sure that we can keep our production lines up and running. So we very quickly put in physical distancing, PPE, sanitizer, started our own testing program internally, just to make sure that we could keep everything going in Fredericton, Baltimore, and other locations around the world. And then that turned into how do we keep our customers going, and then layer on top this new facet to our business, which is supplying COVID tests across Canada. And that has resulted in us doubling our staff and tripling our footprint here in Fredericton over the past 6 months, and it just continues to escalating every day.
Tell me overall how it impacted the staff that you have doing the jobs that they were doing versus the team you have now and what they're doing now.
We're a product-based company, so we produce a product at the end of the day. So at the core of everything is our operations team that is making different chemicals, and then we have warehouse people that are packing kits, and then people that are getting products out the door or buying raw materials to come in. That team has been the heart and soul, the beating heart of the entire company throughout the entire thing. Troopers to no end that, regardless of how bad things were getting around the world, whether it was in New Brunswick, Canada as a whole, North America, or globally, nobody put up any kind of a stink. Everybody put their heads down, did their jobs. And usually we have 75% of our staff working in facilities. That flipped over to 75% of our staff being remote. So everybody else had to figure out how to really do their jobs and maintain communication using things like Microsoft Teams and Zoom, and making sure that we could continue the communication with our customers. We can get the flow of goods internationally. Everybody stepped up across the board in their own unique way. And everybody was focused on the goal, which it changed for us from being a world leader in a very, very small space, which is testing for microorganisms in water, to being able to literally save lives. And everyone rose to that challenge.
And we're all very proud of the work that your company has done. And it was pretty exciting when we saw the Prime Minister announce your company name, because at that time, we were all watching those federal updates every day. So we were really proud of you.
He actually scooped us. I'm not kidding. We were working with Procurement Canada, Public Health Agency of Canada. We were going to do a press release the following week, and the Prime Minister's office took it upon themselves to, what can we announce today? Oh, we'll pick that one. And I didn't even know that was happening. None of us knew. So it turned into a fire drill, and I ended up on about 15 different interviews over the next 2 days.
Jenny, for your business, you mentioned that in the early days, you were not able to work for the first few weeks. Then it was you and Peter, and then slowly you started to bring staff back. Tell me about that journey and where are you at today?
We didn't have any trouble getting people to come back to work. Our staff were excited and wanted to be there. So our full-time bartender came back first, and our full-time sous chef came back at the same time. And then we were able, with the addition of the sipping container and our outdoor spaces when they opened, we were able to bring back all of the part-time staff. They don't have the same shifts that they had. The full-time staff are fully employed. The part-time shifts, they have other full-time jobs, and then this is their supplemental income. So they still have a shift or two a week. So we're feeling pretty good about that.
It's pretty incredible how every business has been affected in some way, some more significantly than others. We have lost some businesses, but we have some businesses that have grown and some who have found new products and services. Scott, I'm interested in hearing how this has impacted the employment in your business.
It was a little difficult to find additional laborers in the middle of the summer, but we were able to do that. What I didn't recognize was a couple of weeks in, some of the employees, we started hearing that they were actually grateful to be coming into the office. We as a company, and we do really count ourselves blessed that we have the space to be able to keep everybody there, honor the physical distancing, and have those processes in place. But to see the way the employees came together, and we've always been proud of our team and the culture that we have there, but to see them over the last number of months, just to see them really galvanized, and to recognize that we are fortunate that we've been able to be there and we've had no reduction in staff. But yeah, for now we'll keep pressing forward.
So we all know that businesses are built on the relationships that we have with our clients. Tell me about the relationships with your clients and how they have changed or how they have stayed the same, and how you found new clients.
Even that, by making that decision, saying we don't have enough information to just shut things down. And I'm not going to lie, there was some really hard conversations in the boardroom. There was one day where our senior management team left, and I sat there and cried. But I knew that I felt in my heart that we just didn't have enough information just to shut everything down at the time. And I'm careful in saying that because nobody knew what to do at the time. Nobody had any information to look back at and say, what do I do in this situation? So I don't, as I look at what others did, some were forced to shut down, others pivoted, and then others made that decision to close. And I don't think there is any right or wrong answer there, but as we made that decision to stay open and continue pressing on, and as Jenny mentioned, still looking for ways to grow, what we realized is that it exposed us to new customers or potential new customers that it didn't matter how much marketing or anything we had done or knocking on doors, but the business actually came to us. So there were a number of weeks and even months where we were seeing new business come to us that otherwise we wouldn't have had if we had not stayed open.
Jenny, you're well known for your customer service and for being a favorite restaurant in our downtown. How did your customers react to this situation, and have you developed new clientele? How are your customers responding to what's happened?
I've never been so grateful to be in New Brunswick running a small business. We of course spoke to our mentors in Toronto and throughout other larger cities around Canada around what they were doing, because they were a step ahead of us. And when they heard about the kind of support we were receiving from our clientele, people were shocked. And Peter and I knew that that was a reflection of living somewhere where people understand if they want small businesses to thrive, they have to support them. And I did not expect to feel that way, to feel that amount of support. I mean, I almost ran out of gift cards, people wanting to buy ridiculous amounts of gift cards that you knew they weren't going to use. People, when they did curbside, were tipping, because even though our staff initially weren't back, Peter and I were sending those tips to the staff who were at home. because CERB was a great thing, but that's not a sufficient amount of money for many people to live on.
Your company is very grassroots. It's not a global company the way that, or an international or national company the way that some of the others are. You rely on people that live on our streets to come into your restaurant. So I think that's awesome that you're developing a new clientele.
Yeah, I mean, we came here with an eye towards contributing to our home province. And I certainly never expected to feel that support and contribution coming back towards me.
So Pat, how about in your business? You already had a very busy and successful business doing water testing for municipalities and all the things that your company's done. What has happened to that work? How is the relationship with that clientele? And tell me about the relationship with your new clients. How is that working?
One of the big challenges that we realized immediately at the start of the pandemic is more than 90% of our revenue is generated outside of Canada. So if borders are shut down, can't travel, can't go and see people. I have, for the past 7 months, I haven't set foot in an airport or on an airplane for the first time in 15 years. It's a very different way of doing things, but we have gotten really good at maintaining strong customer relationships using video conference, phone, things of that nature, to the point where I'm questioning, well, wait a minute, when this all opens up, do we really need to get on an airplane again? Because I kind of like this being at home thing. So we have worked really hard collectively to manage our customer relationships just as well remotely as if we were front and center in front of them all the time. And that has proven to be effective. It hasn't been as easy because of supply chain disruptions and the fact that global transportation is completely disrupted. There's not as much availability of shipping space on airplanes and boats and things like that. I heard anecdotally the other day from my supply chain director that air shipment to Europe is now taking as long as boat shipment to Europe because there's just no airplanes. So we've had to manage that with a lot of our customers, forward deploy some of our inventory, but by and large, I think we've kept everybody pretty happy. Our new customer base, I'll admit, we're still figuring it out. I never really envisioned Lumen Ultra would get into the clinical diagnostic testing sector. It's a very different area than we have worked in previously. And as a consequence, we've hired new people that understand that space. We now have a director of government affairs. We have clinical business development representatives. And we're all kind of figuring it out as we go. Everything from research and development to product applications. We're getting our feet wet and figuring out how do we really operate in this clinical space.
I'm interested in hearing about who is your competition in the work that you're currently focused on.
It is a collection of 800-pound gorillas. So it's large American companies like Thermo Fisher Scientific, Abbott Laboratories, Cadell is another one, and then you have some European behemoths like Roche Diagnostics and Qiagen. Thermo Fisher Scientific, their market cap is $300 billion. So they are literally an 800-pound gorilla. So what we have determined is that, look, we're a new entrant in the space. We've invested heavily within this space, and our model is we're going to be the small dog that's going to run around and get some scraps and figure this stuff out as we go, because all the big boys are focused on their biggest customers and keeping them happy. They're dropping balls with some of the smaller and medium-sized customers. Those are the ones that we're going to go after.
Welcome back to Business Insight Fredericton. I'm Krista Ross, your host, the CEO of the Fredericton Chamber of Commerce. I feel as if the restaurant and hospitality industry in this community has really come together. I'm interested to hear how you feel about competition these days.
I don't think it's changed for me. We've always referred to our peers as co-opetition. We know that no one wants to come to a city with one good restaurant. It's really important that arts and restaurants thrive, particularly in a capital city. So there's a spirit of cheering each other on, and certainly a spirit of collaboration and helping each other where we can. Peter and I rely on, as I say, our mentors in Toronto and Halifax, even in Moncton, to make sure we're getting fresh ideas so we're not all offering things that are too similar. But in terms of the spirit of competition, I think we're all very supportive of each other, certainly with MoCo, with 540, these downtown restaurants. We collaborate. I know if I run out of takeout containers, I can have them within a half an hour. And then just providing each other with some solutions. You know, how did you address A, B, or C? And we very quickly started up a food and beverage Facebook page for people who own restaurants in Fredericton, and a ton of information was shared there. You know, sorting through CERB for your employees, and all of a sudden, you know, we're doing a ton of HR that we hadn't been doing before. Being able to just ask those questions and get them answered quickly, and sometimes by you, was just a huge help to us. So there's been a spirit of like, look, we're all in this together. We have similar problems to solve, and we're going to solve them in different ways, probably. But there may be some shared information that will just make our lives easier.
It really hasn't changed a lot. I saw, and I really do think it's unfortunate. A lot of them did dial it back. They went back to skeleton staffs, and you know, I said earlier, the decisions we make, is there a right or a wrong? It was unfortunate. I think that some of these other companies did have an opportunity to really step up, and I guess maybe that's what's set us apart a little bit and allowed us to continue to grow through this.
You mentioned, Scott, that you took advantage of, or at least applied to participate in the job sharing or the work sharing program. Tell me about the programs that, were you able to access any programs? Do you feel that there were programs out there that worked for you, or was that not something you were able to participate in?
You know, I felt like the governments at all levels, right? And I mean, starting right down at our own municipal, whether it be the Chamber of Commerce or, I think everybody upped their game a little bit. We were able to take advantage early on with some of the wage subsidies, but because we've been fortunate, we haven't had to partake in some of those subsidies. But I think overall, what they provided employers has been good from my perspective, maybe not from other people's perspectives. I don't see all the different circumstances that people find themselves in, so it's not for me to judge that, but I do believe that they really did, with limited knowledge, what are we going to do? They were able to step up and offer some programs. When we did apply for the work sharing, we actually applied on the Sunday. It was, I think, March 15th, and we were approved the following Friday. That's quick for government. And so to see them moving that quickly, I felt that they did a good job.
Jenny, were you able to take advantage of, or were you eligible for any of the government programs that were put out to help support businesses?
Yes, well, there was the small business loan, which is interest-free until December 2022, and then a portion of that is forgivable. So that's kind of a no-brainer, and I think there's a part 2 coming out here shortly. Yeah. So for us then, being able to go ahead and finish our outdoor patio space confidently, because obviously cash flow within a restaurant, it's a wheel that has to keep turning, and we've never run too close to the edge there, and again, just a personal choice of how we run the business. But to go ahead and lay out that kind of money when the future is uncertain, it was easier to do when we had this loan and we knew we'd have it for a year and a half. So it was easier to make those decisions, because again, our first concern was, if we get closed down again, we need to be able to take care of our employees. So that money just gave us that little safety net, and that was very useful. We are periodically taking part in the wage subsidy. Of course, now that it's a sliding scale, we're filing all the time, but before it was, if it was 30%, you had to be at least 30% below, which we were several months. That's super helpful, obviously, again, in terms, now that they've changed it so you're not de-incentivizing businesses to make money. I thought that was a very smart move. We continued to pay our rent fully throughout the process. Our landlord is a guy with a family who's in the same boat we are, and we had the money to pay that, and we thought it was important to do that. So we are mindful of not overly taking part in government programming if we don't need it.
Given that your company pivoted pretty quickly and was selling lots of new product to new clients. Were there any programs that you were able to benefit from?
We had a scale-up problem, right? We had to pull off projects that would normally take 2 or 3 years and do them in 2 or 3 months. Everything from building a brand new, Class 7 clean room facility across the river, 16,000 square feet, total redo, gut job, build all the new equipment, a pretty significant project, to developing new test kits for new things, to scaling up our inventory to make sure that we could go from 500,000 tests a week to 5 million tests a week. There was a lot to be done within a 2 or 3 month period, and it took some cash flow as well. So we had pretty extensive support from NRC IRAP, from the Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency, from the NGen Supercluster, and from the province of New Brunswick, from Opportunities New Brunswick, to help us to not only fund some of those things, but also get the expertise to be able to understand how to get them done and how to get them done fast. And we had multiple conversations. We wrote the book in many ways for WorkSafe NB's manual on how to manage out-of-province workers coming into the province. We were patient zero, so we collaborated very, very closely with WorkSafe, and I could go on and on. But at the end of the day, we had tremendous support from the federal and provincial governments to be able to pull off what we did.
I want to talk about a message. If you were going to give a message to the general public about supporting local business, about supporting your business or other businesses, what would that message be? I'll start with you, Pat.
We're all in this together. At the end of the day, I think we have to help each other. We have to look out for one another. We have to be patient with one another. The situation that we're in now is not necessarily unprecedented, but it's unprecedented for the time that we live in, which is ultra short attention spans, total self-centered view of the world, in that everything revolves around me, and then all of a sudden a little virus that you can't even see shows up and changes absolutely everything. It impacts everybody, not just me, but us and all of us overall. And I think, being kind to one another, recognizing that everybody has their own unique challenges, and helping each other out, looking out for one another, those are the most important things at the end of the day. And, I think we should all feel blessed to live in a place where that is more common knowledge than most parts of the world, here in New Brunswick in the Maritimes.
I think my message would just be thank you. People's willingness to adjust as needed has made all the difference. So whether it's understanding that maybe coming out to dinner at 5 o'clock rather than 7 is very helpful to us. Making reservations, which we never required people to do. Going out to restaurants is about luxury, and it's about a certain feeling that you don't need to worry about anything. So for people to be prepared to sign up to come in at a certain time, to have their reservation last a certain time, to pay via e-transfer, all these little sort of inconveniences to the customer that normally we would avoid at all costs. We're so appreciative of people's willingness to play along and to kind of walk with us and make some of those adjustments as necessary.
As a company, our culture, our values haven't changed through all of this, and I think it's really cool that Jenny's here. And it's not just about supporting local, but also about our government actually getting on board. And when they placed those first very large orders with us for face shields, it felt like all those years of saying, when you work with us, all came together overnight. And so that by them supporting us, it allowed us to give, even during these tough times, $15,000 to the Fredericton Resilience Fund, which supported the hospitality workers here in Fredericton. And so when they support local, we're able to continue to exercise that culture and the values that we have as a company, and even do it in a greater way.
One of the things, obviously this pandemic has been focused on people's physical health and this virus, but another thing that has happened is we've seen a lot of people being challenged with mental health and emotional issues that they've had to deal with. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about how your business has helped your employees in this regard.
So in our own company, we're aware of it. We've noticed some things with employees, and we have programs available to our employees that we cover, and I think we're all going to have to be cognizant of the fact that there's going to be some lingering effects, not just on our employees, but on families of our employees, on children, and so it's important that we all do stick together through all of this.
You know, I'm really glad that you're talking about that and asking about that. For us, mental health is at the front of our minds all the time, not just now, because of course the restaurant industry is notorious for sometimes breeding an unhealthy work environment, and that's a huge part of what Peter and I are trying to do at 11th Mile, is create a space where healthy people have healthy jobs. And they could stay in those jobs for a long period of time and continue to enjoy good health mentally and physically. So we're very open about mental health. We've recently did a training together as a group through the government around domestic and intimate partner violence, because of course that's something that's come up a lot through COVID, how to recognize those signs in our clients and in each other and how to respond. We've also talked a lot amongst ourselves about mental health, and I'll be honest, at this point, everybody's going to therapy, and the restaurant just pays for it. We know this has been a really trying time, and we really saw in September, and Peter and I felt it too, that everybody just kind of hit a wall. And I think it was the awareness that we're coming into fall again, nothing's going to change for a long time. And the fatigue of having to constantly innovate and change and be ready for what's next, I think it just kind of collectively hit us. And at that point, we just had one-on-one talks with people and said, look, this is the kind of support we're prepared to give you. And everyone was like, thank you.
In a business the size of yours, Pat, you're maybe less in touch with each individual employee on a day-to-day basis, but certainly in a large business, you're facing these same issues, I'm sure, and these same challenges. What has Lumen Ultra been able to do to help support your staff with any of their mental health challenges?
Our challenge has been people burning themselves out, quite honestly, and it's about getting out in front of that burnout. You know, in an environment where you're moving 100 miles an hour and changing every single day, we have a lot of very goal-oriented people that they just want to get to that finish line, and they will work themselves to the bone to get there. So we have a rock star HR department. We have a very, very compassionate board. And we have a lot of seasoned professionals that we work with to help manage the heartbeat of the company, that are very people focused, and we have increased the amount of conversation that we have from not only manager to subordinate, but side to side, and from the top to the very bottom, and everything in between. And it's all about communication. It's all about conversation. And I am very willing to admit that I have had no fewer than probably 3 or 4 breakdowns over the past 7 months, where I got to a point where I said, I don't think I can do this. I mean, this is insane. I grew accustomed over the past, well, basically my entire adult life, of doing 80 to 100-hour work weeks, but this is like another gear beyond that. And I've had my share. I've had employees that have had their share, but we are making sure that we're communicating, we're taking care of one another, that we have the resources in place to give people the support that they need. And so far, knock on wood, we haven't had anybody burn out yet.
Scott, how do you feel about the economy, about the business environment, about opportunities in New Brunswick right now?
We have been very fortunate over the last number of months to continue to thrive and grow. But I think eventually it will trickle down to everyone. There's going to be a contraction in the economy. I tend to think myself as a glass half full guy, but also I think I'm a realist, and when you look at everything that's happening, there is going to be some sort of contraction at some point, and hopefully it'll be limited. Hopefully we can figure some of these things out, but in the meantime we will continue to do the things that we can do as a company, as a management team, to position ourselves to be able to sustain and grow through this.
Do you think there are also going to be opportunities that we never thought about?
Oh, absolutely. You just look around, look outside of our industry, and And I think governments are even looking differently now at how they're realizing they can make decisions quicker now than they have in the past. Think about Pat making decisions, doing things that you had to do in 2 or 3 months that normally would have taken 2 or 3 years. We're no different. We became a retail environment overnight, and we never saw ourselves as that. So I think we have to go into it eyes wide open.
What do you think, Jenny? What does the future hold? What does the economy look like going down the road? What opportunities do you think there might be here in New Brunswick?
I don't know. I'm apprehensive, certainly, but at this point I've been pleasantly surprised by a few opportunities that have presented themselves along the way. So I'm just choosing to go forward assuming that will continue. We don't know what's going to happen, and so I kind of got to a point where I thought, why not keep a positive mindset? But at the same time, I'm cautious. So when we make decisions financially as a business, we are cautious, and we're just going to try to stay prepared to change as needed. The one thing I feel certain about is that I don't know what's going to happen, and we haven't known for the past 6 months. It's gone okay. So I just choose to kind of say, well, maybe it'll keep going okay, and then we'll be ready to change as necessary.
Where there are challenges and where there are points of volatility within the market, there's opportunities on the other side of that. It's the law of physics. And I think we need to be looking at it as an opportunity to pull New Brunswick's future forward by 10, 20, 30 years. We can do it right now if we look at what those opportunities actually are.
You've mentioned a couple of organizations that were able to help your company through this. Tell me which organizations or governments were able to lend you the support that you needed to turn the corner.
Number one was the Public Health Agency of Canada. So, they are now our number one customer. I have no problem saying that. And they opened our eyes to the opportunity to be able to take what we did in a very small sector, unknown sector, which is the water space, and bring that over to the clinical sector, which I didn't see in our future for probably a decade. They helped us realize that we had some very, very high-tech and unique skills around the world that only a handful of other companies do, and pulled us right into that sector. So I'm grateful for that, and we collaborate almost on a daily basis with PHAC to this day. A variety of other federal agencies like IRAP have helped us to develop new technologies that are going to be very instrumental in fighting and containing or managing the pandemic. Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency, PSPC, NGen, ONB, Department of Health here in New Brunswick, the list goes on and on.
I would say the Chamber of Commerce was probably, our biggest help. As in all things, we know we can turn to the Chamber for information. And there was a lot of conflicting information flying around at the beginning. In terms of government funding and so on, that's been hugely helpful to us. Our local accountants have been hugely helpful to us in helping us understand how to navigate and fill out some of this paperwork. Other than that, I would say it's been our peers within the restaurant industry reaching out to, as I say, because Toronto is 2-3 weeks ahead of us almost all the time, reaching out to those friends and mentors and saying, okay, how are you handling these problems? What kinds of solutions have you guys found? And then just trying to share those as well as we can.
One that comes to mind most is strategic procurement with the province. I've had several intimate conversations with them about the fact that they always understood New Brunswick first, but when they saw, us being able to produce shields, and then it carried on into other areas. We did physical distancing dividers for every classroom and every school in the province. We outfitted all the Service New Brunswick locations across the province so that they could reopen. But it was some of those initial conversations back in mid-March with strategic procurement when they realized that, they may not be the cheapest, but one, they can get it done. They're going to get it done well, and they're going to deliver it on time. So just to build that relationship with them that we've worked so hard for years to try and say, if you just work with us here a little bit. So they've been really good, and then there's so many others, but that's the one that really stands out to me.
I'm going to ask you all a question now that isn't necessarily COVID related, but it's just business related. I'm interested in what is the best advice that any of you have been given as an entrepreneur or as a business owner. Who'd like to start?
Real simple, and I got this from one of my independent board members who I've known now for about 4 years, and I trust to give very strong business operational advice. I asked him one day, how do you figure out the right path? How do I just cut to the chase and just get to the right answer? He said, you can't. The secret is you just have to recognize that you're going to have to try a whole bunch of stuff, and you're going to have to throw away the bad stuff and keep the good stuff, and keep iterating all the time. Always be changing, always be innovating, and I would like to think that advice, which stuck with me from when I first heard it 4 years ago, put us in a very good position to be able to adapt in a very volatile environment that we live in today.
Well, I think it's to understand that you're a restaurateur, but some situations call upon you to be an entrepreneur more than a restaurateur. And so we're not trained, we don't have business degrees. There's a lot of us running restaurants who don't necessarily see ourselves as strong in that field. So to even recognize that and to look for that kind of mentorship and help, and understand, for instance, this current situation is a time when we're being called upon to develop new ways of doing business. We cannot just keep doing the same thing we've been doing over and over. And as has been alluded to already in this conversation, where there's a challenge, there's an opportunity. And that's how entrepreneurs think, and that's how we have to think. There will be a solution. It might not be the first one you try, but giving up's not an option.
It was a friend a long time ago, we were talking about business decisions and stuff, and some of the greatest hitters in baseball, even at batting 300, they fail 7 out of 10 times, or whether it be hockey, and Sidney Crosby doesn't score every time he takes a shot. So when you think of these guys that are at the top of their game, when we're making decisions, it's all right to fail, but then to fail fast, get back up, and keep on going.
So often we have mentors in our careers. Have you had a mentor?
I had so many. I'd be remiss to, I never set out to own a business. That was never my intention. My career path did a complete 180 20 years ago, but over the years there's been so many people that have just spoken wisdom into my life, have been there and not just been a cheerleader, because we can all have cheerleaders, but I need people that will challenge me and say, hey, wait, you got to stop. As you're running over the edge of the cliff, there's lots of people saying you can do this, but to pull you back and so there's many that I can think of that have been there, and I think we need many in our lives. I don't know that sometimes there's just one.
My first mentor was my father. A guy that had a good job with the New Brunswick Power Corporation, got fed up with it and decided to go out on his own when he was 34 years old, back in 1984, or 1983 actually, and never looked back. And I grew up in a household with an entrepreneur that had his own company, hearing about the trials and tribulations of all of that, so it was almost kind of ingrained into my brain. And it was kind of my chosen path, I think, before I even knew that it was my chosen path. And Dad taught me a lot of things about how to, not necessarily how to run a business, but how to see opportunities and how to execute, how to take care of your customers, and how to always be creative. And I learned, as much as I could, and unfortunately it got cut short when I was 28. I took over the company. He passed away from cancer. Which was, it was always the plan to have a succession plan, but I didn't envision being a CEO when I was 28 years old. So, that came and went, and, more recently, I have a few different mentors. I've had probably, 20 mentors over the past 20 years. But right now, I would say my chief mentor is my business partner, a gentleman named Khalil, who's a partner at a company called XPV Water Partners, which is, along with myself, the other shareholder in Lumen Ultra. And I've learned more from him over the past 4 years than I think I've learned about business in my entire life.
As an aside, not only are you a CEO that started at a very young age, but you're one of the top 50 CEOs in Atlantic Canada. And I know your company has won lots of other awards as well. So just a congratulations on that top 50 CEO.
Thank you.
It's
and
great.
Likewise.
What is the thing that you're the most proud of in your career as an entrepreneur?
I'm fairly young in my career as an entrepreneur, but thus far I'm proud of the work culture that Peter and I have created, which was first and foremost at the front of our minds when we set out to open a business, that we wanted a space that people wanted to be in, where people could thrive and where they could either build a future or use to leverage to get to the next step that they wanted to get to. And so far we've accomplished that. Much the same way the community turned around and took care of us, our staff have done the same. And I did not expect to need support from our staff, but even just flexibility, the willingness to come back to work, the flexibility to work when we need them, that kind of loyalty and the way I see them pitching in makes me feel very proud.
I used to only have one, now I have two. So the longest lasting was that when I inherited Lumen Ultra in 2008 from an operational perspective, there had been a lot of money invested in trying to get the company off the ground, family money, government money, bank money, quite a bit of debt, and we weren't making money at the time. And we were very, very fortunate that all of the hard work we had paid off and things started going from the red to the black by 2009, 2010. But one of the we'll say the guillotines that was always floating over my head was that my mother was actually the one that was at risk of losing a lot of money if I didn't deliver, if I didn't come through. And by, I think it was December 31st, 2014, we made our final payment on our final piece of debt that had been accrued in all years prior. And I think we are probably one of the only companies in Atlantic Canadian history that paid off every cent of debt that they got with the BDC, with ACOA, with CBDC, banks, family money, everything else. And being able to achieve that and take my mother off the hook for something that she had nothing to do with was, I think, probably the thing that I am the most proud of. But I'm even more proud of our team now and the culture that we've created internally that enabled a core team of 70 people, if you can call that a core team, and absorb 80 new people into that fold from all walks of life, all around the world, Canada, US, Europe, and all points in between, from top to bottom and side to side to basically just double like that overnight, really without skipping a beat. Being able to integrate and being able to manage each other and all those personalities with all these new traits and new skills that we've never had before, and be able to just keep running at 100 miles an hour has been nothing short of astonishing. And I'm very proud of our team for being able to do that.
Jenny, what has been the biggest challenge for you and your business over the past 7 months? And going forward, what do you think is going to be the biggest challenge?
The biggest challenge for us, I think, has been the empathy and insight that's required to know what people want from us right now. So we're thinking about things like, okay, we're drawing from a smaller pool, which means we need those people to come more often. So how do we do that? Okay, well, we've done that by changing the menu almost weekly, changing the drink menu almost weekly. We're also dealing with a group of people who are not comfortable coming into restaurants at some points, and we need to respect that. So then we've offered them curbside. Trying to think about what it is that our customers need from us that we know is different from what we've been doing. The second thing, of course, is making sure that people feel comfortable when they're in the restaurant. We work in an industry where you would never correct a customer. And now we have to do that. I have to direct people's activities. I have to let them know if what they're doing is making other people uncomfortable. I have to clean in front of customers in a way we would never have done. So those little shifts around making sure that if someone in my restaurant is feeling a bit afraid, the things they see don't make them more afraid, but that someone who isn't feeling afraid isn't made to feel that they've been chastised or corrected.
What do you think will be the biggest challenge going forward?
Honestly, I'm just going to wait and see. I don't know. I could guess. And we've talked already about the optimism that's required to sort of keep going right now. I can imagine at some point, as bad weather hits and people aren't traveling and we are just starting to see COVID numbers rising, I can only imagine that will lead to a decreased desire to go to restaurants. So this is why we've kept the curbside going, so that we can continue to send food out to people in a contactless manner, should that become what the public wants again. So we've got a plan, and that plan is subject to change if things don't go the way I think they will.
It's just understanding where everybody's at and just really being conscious. It kind of goes back to that mental health aspect of it, is just making sure that we're looking after our staff, and it's not about just surviving through this thing. It's to make sure that when we come out the other side, everybody's still intact and still has their mental health, and which is more important than anything else that we're facing right now.
Speeding up and slowing down. So, the challenge that we've had is how do we achieve a different velocity? How do we get up the hill as fast as we possibly can? Finding ways to get things done faster than we otherwise may have done in the past, or differently than we may have otherwise done in the past. Not knowing what the future would hold, is the second wave going to come in July or August? Luckily for us, it didn't. Looks like maybe now is the time when it is coming here in October, trying to move as fast as we can. But now what I'm seeing is there's an addiction to that speed. And everybody thinks, okay, we've got to operate at this velocity all the time. Well, no, we have people for that now, and we have facilities for that now. We don't need to burn the candle at both ends. Now we have to kind of find a new normal. And it's that pace of business, really, at the end of the day, that sometimes you have to put it into, a higher gear, but then eventually you have to bring it back down because it's an unsustainable pace.
Ultimately, I think at the end of the day, what I'm hoping for is to feel that we have made ourselves proud and made our community proud as we respond to the demands of this next year or so. I don't know what they're going to be. So I think we're just feeling ready, poised to continue to try to make good decisions, to still be standing when this is all done, and not just surviving, but doing well as individuals.
We're always looking for great companies with a unique story to feature on the show. If you have suggestions, please get in touch with us.